and Islamism, everyone. And I apologize, I'm out of breath because I have to run here. Just made it on time. So sorry for holding you up a little bit. So what I want to talk about today is a very intriguing case in the UK. When I have 2 minutes, very intriguing case in the UK from 2014. There was a case called the Trojan Horse Affair, and it was an operation. It was a case that alleged a Muslim takeover of schools in a UK city called Birmingham. Last year, the New York Times and Serial did a podcast to re-examine the Trojan Horse Affair. And you may have listened to this because it became quite popular. In case you missed it and you're not familiar with the case, I'll just give you a brief overview. So at the heart of this affair was an anonymous letter that was found in a school, and it alleged a secret plot that was codenamed Operation Trojan Horse. And it was allegedly an operation that was orchestrated by Muslim professionals to take over and Islamize schools across Birmingham in the city. Now, the letter appears to be a correspondence between two Muslim conspirators, and it allegedly was found by an anonymous source in a manager's office. Okay, so you can see how already we're sort of treading on fraught waters, allegedly anonymous, so on. Okay, the letter was widely considered to be fraudulent, and the author of the letter was never formally identified. And the two co-hosts of this podcast traveled far and wide across the country and across the world to try to understand who the author of the letter was and why it was written, because the author of the letter was never formally identified. So the main mission of the podcast is who wrote this letter. Okay. Now, as I listened to this podcast, it raised a question for me that I tried to unpick in this paper, and that is this: how is it possible that a letter that is widely considered to be, and even at the time, was widely considered to be fraudulent, could not only lead to a witch hunt against Muslim school teachers, but also foment national hysteria about the presence of Muslims in Britain? Okay, because that's essentially what happened after this letter, and it was widely considered to be fraudulent. It's quite clear to me that this was what we call a racialized hoax. Okay, and these kinds of racialized hoaxes have existed since time immemorial, and they've been used to uphold white supremacy to achieve particular goals. They're usually concocted to send political messages and therefore target whole communities and not just the individual concerned. Even when these hoaxes have been exposed, the images of the Black criminal or the Muslim terrorist or extremist linger in the public imagination. In the US, for example, there is a history of Black men being accused of raping white women, and was a significant rationale for the lynching laws in the US. There's a film that was out recently, I think last month, called Till. Some of you may have seen this, about the life history of Emmett Till and his tragic case, and that was based on a lie that he was, sexually inappropriate towards a white woman. We have this in literature as well. To Kill a Mockingbird, for example, was quite a famous book, and it's based on it's about the criminal case of a Black man who was alleged to have raped a white woman, but again was proved not to be the case. The problem with racialized hoaxes is they're often very difficult to disprove for the victim, and they become quite prominent because they tap into widely held racist and Islamophobic views. They reflect the social climate, and they're very crucial in reinforcing racism and Islamophobia for each new generation. So I think that in each generation, there needs to be a reaffirmation of racism and Islamophobia, and racialized hoaxes play a very important role in that. So racialized hoaxes are very socially harmful for minority communities. In the Muslim case, they've relied heavily on caricatured images of Muslims and Islam, and they oftentimes work because of the established association between criminality, extremism, radicalization, and terrorism in the popular imagination. The racialized hoax of the Trojan Horse became prominent in part because it tapped into the long-held fears of Muslims in the West, in Britain, coming as immigrants, terrorists, violent, and taking over Britain. Okay. Now, the other interesting thing from the UK context about this case is that this was not the first racialized hoax to have happened in the education sector, and it was not the first racialized hoax to have happened in Birmingham either. So there's a 20-year history of this having happened. So there are, for example, the case of Nashaba Hussain. Nashaba was a former advisor for the government's Equalities Commission, and she alleged that she was removed as a head of school of Springfield Primary School in 1993, following a campaign against her by a, quote, sinister group of extremist Muslims in Birmingham. And then she trotted out the sort of typical kinds of allegations, because these Muslims believe that women shouldn't work, they shouldn't be educated. She didn't believe in forced marriages, and the Muslim community did, and so on. And in 2014, she claimed that the Trojan Horse operation had been operating for decades and that she was a victim of it 20 years earlier. In fact, actually, the truth of the matter is, which is reported in the press at the time, is that she was sacked because of inaccuracies that were discovered on her job application and on her CV, and for what was described as a, quote, loss of faith and trust in the head by the governing body as a result of financial mismanagement. So you can see how there's a retrospective redeployment of the Islamophobia narrative to try to cover other things. And there are other cases of people like Balwar Baines and Bhupinder Kondo who similarly sort of jumped into these racialized hoaxes when there are other things going on completely differently. Now, part of the answer to the question and to understanding how a hoax letter was successfully weaponized, I want to argue lies in strategic ignorance, which is deliberately cultivated in the face of racist outcomes and injuries of events by those who benefit from them. It functions to keep the racist lie alive so that it can wreak its havoc. Now, given that the letter, as I said, emerged in the context of a war on terror, in which there were already pre-existing narratives about the threat of Muslims to the West, this wasn't difficult. And these frames provided the main way to make sense of this letter. Now, the analysis of racialized ignorance aims to uncover the power relations and structures of power that sustain and enable ignorance. Where it concerned racist Islamophobic injury, exploitation, and oppression, ignorance isn't necessarily an accidental oversight. It's the key point. It's not necessarily something which is an accidental oversight that can be remedied with information. Instead, it's a deliberate position that's cultivated for the purposes of domination and the simultaneous projection of innocence. Actively not knowing and not wanting to know is what goes to the heart of ignorance. And the power of strategic ignorance is to formally institutionalize what is known and unknown, and a lot of energy is expanded in maintaining this kind of status quo so that those who benefit from it can ardently believe in the lie. The costs and benefits of ignorance mean that those that are instead in it have a vested interest in keeping up appearances. And throughout Western history, strategic ignorance has played a key role in maintaining the image of the West as a benevolent force for good in the world at a time, at times when its conduct suggests otherwise. Now, in his book, The Racial Contract, Mills develops this concept of ignorance, and he sees it as the, quote, spread of misinformation, the distribution of error within the larger social cluster, the group entity of whites, and social practices that encourage it. For Mills, the consequence of this racialized ignorance is that, quote, on matters related to race, the racial contract prescribes for its signatories an inverted epistemology, an epistemology of ignorance, a particular pattern of localized cognitive dysfunctions, whether psychologically and socially functional, producing the ironic outcome that whites will in general be unable to understand the world they themselves have made. White people end up, quote, averting one's eyes from certain uncomfortable factual and moral truths, ignorances, and ignoring evidence, and being blind to things they should see. So what Mills is alluding to here is a structured blindness, which he argues is the tacit agreement to misinterpret the world. So there's a real pressure that underpins the structural imperative for ignorance, particularly because as we live in the information age, there's a wide availability of critical information which daily challenges the benign image that the West has constructed for itself. As such, structural ignorance functions to establish and reify hegemonic visions of the world that enable the dismissal of critical information that can destabilize it. And so it's to that end that Mills argues that white society has a positive interest in seeing a racially distorted image of the world, and it's an image which is deliberately cultivated by various institutions. The individual ignorance is therefore buttressed by broader social ignorances as it's cultivated at the institutional level. Now, the key thing to note here is that practices of racial ignorance operate at the structural level and they're socially acceptable. The costs and benefits attached to what one does and doesn't know, and with what one wants to know or doesn't want to know, means that ignorance needs to be managed. And Baldwin argues that, quote, takes grotesquely prodigious effort as both an individual and a social labor. So if we come to the Trojan Horse Affair, the widely known nature of this letter was made into an unknown to clear the way for what I would argue was new counterterrorism legislation and policies, so that there was a direct link between the two. Okay, following the revelations of the Trojan Horse plot, there was a concerted effort to ignore crucial facts and aspects of the case, and there was a refusal to identify the author. Okay, and I just want to pick up on 3 or 4 things which I think are quite curious and point to this sort of deliberate attempt to not look at certain aspects to maintain a particular image of what this affair represents. So firstly, in investigating this alleged plot, the principle of ignorance determined that both the official investigations into this affair, one by Peter Clark and the second by Ian Kershaw, didn't concern themselves with finding the author of the letter or determining whether it was a hoax. They just didn't care about that, which to me is quite astonishing. They both proceeded as if the alleged plot was real. Okay, so even though there's no evidence that this is a real letter, they proceeded as if it was a real plot. When both reports were published, the Clark report found no evidence of terrorism or radicalization and extremism in the schools concerned, and the Kershaw report found no evidence of a conspiracy to promote an anti-British agenda. These findings were also mirrored in the report by the Education Select Committee. So that's the first thing. They didn't care about who the author was, and they proceeded about as if the plot was real. Secondly, the then Education Secretary, Michael Gove, set aside reservations that were relayed to him directly about the plot and pressed ahead with harmful intervention. He was briefed by the local authority in February of 2014 that there was a, quote, serious credibility gap regarding the letter because it contained, quote, serious factual inaccuracies and in a number of areas, contradictions. So he was told this directly. Gove was also briefed by the local authorities own audit on its own audit report into the allegations, which found that there was no basis for the allegations, and was told of West Midland Police's recommendation that the letter was bogus. Thirdly, the then Education Secretary Nicky Morgan was accused of misleading Parliament, which is a violation of the ministerial code and oftentimes requires that the person concerned resigns their post. She was accused of misleading Parliament about the Trojan Horse Affair when she presented her department's report, about which Professor Holmwood said, quote, she knew or ought to have known that the report was inaccurate on a number of material points and misrepresented the situation with regards to Muslims and the schooling of pupils in East Birmingham. So by doing this, she enabled the strategic ignorance of Parliament on this matter. Fourthly, there were factual errors in the letters, and there was a claim, for example, in this letter, that Nasraba Hussain, who I mentioned previously, who was a former head teacher of Springfield School, was hounded out of her post by the St. Potters 20 years earlier, when in fact we know that she left, or she had to leave for a whole range of other reasons. And as Asim wrote in a media article at the time on the Trojan Horse Affair, there was actually very little fact-checking of the allegations that were contained in the letter, either by the journalist that wrote the story for the Times or the British Humanist Association, which received the complaint by the Birmingham schools by 2 white teachers, because to do so would cover the veil of ignorance under which the state and sections of mainstream media were shamelessly residing. Now, the key thing to come out of all of this is what happens with the letter, how is the letter weaponized, how is it used. So in 2014, the UK government introduced what it called the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act, which made the Prevent Counter-Terrorism strategy a legal duty for public sector institutions. The Trojan Horse Affair provided an easy rationalization for this as a legal duty, because there was a lot of contentious debate about overreach, the impact on education, and so on. And so the letter was quite instrumental in implementing the legal use, particularly in the education sector, particularly in schools where the bulk of prevent referrals to the channel program emanate. Since its inception, it's resulted in thousands of young Muslim school children being referred to the channel program. It's created a climate of fear in schools, colleges, and universities. A year after the Trojan Horse Affair, the government introduced its counter-extremism strategy, which on the back of the Trojan Horse Affair created the Extremism Analysis Unit at the Home Office to monitor and compile blacklists of extremist individuals and organizations. Now, these powers were introduced to target those individuals and organizations who were considered to be unacceptable for engagement, but they hadn't necessarily broken the law, right? So introduce new powers to ban suspected extremist groups and individuals and restrict access to university premises and school premises used for extremist purposes. And typically we're talking here now about mosques and community centers. The overarching aim of the new powers in the counter-extremism strategy was to set in motion what the then Home Secretary Theresa May, who later became Prime Minister, called entryism, a counter-entryism operation across the public sector to try to hunt down dangerous Muslims that might be planning or executing other similar style of Trojan Horse operations across the country. So in other words, both the prevent duty and the counter-extremism strategy use the sense of suspicion about Muslims that emerged from the Trojan Horse Affair and extended it across the nation by legalizing a mass referral system underpinned by the surveillance of Muslims. So the damage of the Trojan Horse Affair was significant, and it continues to be felt by Muslim school children today who find it increasingly difficult to practice their faith at schools. The weaponization of the letter was necessary for the legitimacy of a raft of new counterterrorism policies and powers, and it functioned as a key piece of evidence in demonstrating the need for new draconian powers. But a strategic ignorance about the authenticity of the letter had to be cultivated that would allow the government to act as if the letter was indeed evidence of a real fraud in order to preserve its image as an ethical actor working for the well-being of all people in the face of a national terrorist threat. It was also necessary to protect the new counterterrorism powers that have been ventured on the letter in order to further discipline and control Muslims. So to end, I would say that the Trojan Horse Affair was an instance of an Islamophobic hoax against Muslims in the UK that was sustained and weaponized with a structured ignorance to enable Islamophobic counterterrorism and counter-extremism policies and legislation which exist even to this day. And we still don't know about the author of the letter, and we haven't heard from them and the motivations for the letter either. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
The next speaker, inshallah, will be Nur Chanifah. Nur Chanifah is a lecturer at the University of Brawijaya who published many books, proceedings, and journals. She has also participated in business scholars at Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. She has also attended short course at the University of California, Law and Culture program at Leipzig University, Germany, and attended international conference in the VG University Amsterdam 2022. So inshallah, I would request her to kindly go on the stage and give her presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mehraj. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. In this occasion, I would like to deliver my presentation or my paper entitled "The Design of Model of Contra-Radicalism Education to Promote Modern Islam for Young Generation in Indonesian University Context." Before presenting, we will give thank you very much to the comrades of the 4th Islamophobia International Conference who give me occasion to present our paper. Thank you very much. This study examining through the design of the contra-radicalism education in university. The background is the cases of the intolerance of radicalism in Indonesia that increased from year to year. According to Wahid Institute research, there is an increase of about 18% from the previous year, from 64 cases to 92 cases. And the impartial research in 19 and 18 until 90 and 19 showed that there were already around 31 cases related to religious freedom. And then the Stara Institute research in 20 and 21 also showed that there have been many cases of religious violence, around 171 violence and 318 violence action. Besides, according to the Wahid Institute, it is because of political contestation that often these politicians use religion to legitimize their political interests. In addition, it is also because hate speech increased in the social media without control or filter. So it often provokes emotion to commit acts of violence. Ironically, the cases of religious intolerance have begun to target the younger generation through educational institutes, especially in universities. The results of a survey by the Center for Islamic and Community Studies in Jakarta in 20 and 20 of 92 universities showed that there are around 30% of students who have a low tolerance. There are 5 reasons why young people are attracted to narrative or even intolerant and radical movement. The first, they are looking for self-identity. A study conducted by the United States Institute of Peace in 2009 showed that 2,000 foreign militants of the Al-Qaeda network came from among students. There are people who are wondering to find their true selves. The second, it requires a feeling togetherness. Terrorist groups are good at taking advantages of the teenager. They want to find the togetherness they something don't get from their families. The third, they want to improve what is considered to be hunting to the sense of justice. These teenagers have a passionate spirit and high idealism to make change. This is what terrorist groups also take advantages. The fourth, they are within a self-image group of teenagers exist. Therefore, they tend not to hesitate to do various ways to appear impressive, including by being part of extremist groups and movements. The last, they have broad access to interact with anyone in cyberspace, including with radical groups. This intersection in cyberspace is often the beginning for young people to join terrorist groups. Therefore, the university must immediately formulate a model of tolerance education. As agent of change, students have a very significant role in bringing change or solving cases of religious intolerance in Indonesia. So, contra-radicalism education is urgent to be realized immediately, especially for public university whose students follows religious background. But unfortunately, so far, the counter-radicalism education model in university still led to the knowledge or cognitive aspect of student. So it is necessary to formulate a model of contra-radicalism education, which not only led to the cognitive aspect, but also the affective and psychomotor aspect, so that students become moderate. In this context, Universitas Brawijaya has initiated moral camp activities to develop the moderate character of students. So, this study focused to Brawijaya University model in Indonesia. Now, university have a latent danger of radicalism in Indonesia. Setara Institute research results show that there are around 10 universities whose students are exposed to radicalism, namely University of Indonesia, Jakarta State Islamic University, Bandung Institute of Technology, Bogor Agricultural Institute, Bandung State Islamic University, Gajah Mada University, Yogyakarta State University, Erlangga University, Mataram University, and Universitas Brawijaya. According BNPT research in 2017, in 15 provinces also showed that about 39% followed radical organization and 26 agreed to jihad with violence. Alfara Research Center in 2017 also that there are about 23% or about 1,800 students who support the jihad of the establishment of an Islamic state. And then the result of the survey conducted by the State Intelligence Agency or WIN showed that about 24% of students who agreed with the Islamic Caliphate or Khilafah Islamiyah. Not only that, in 2018, the results of Faculty of Social and Political Science also showed that there were around 23% of students who supported the implementation of the Khilafah Islamiyah. And then the Habibi Center release in 2019 showed that student recruitment in radical-minded organization is still ongoing today. The research classifies the recruitment model into two models, namely through conservative understanding, such as the Kampus Dakwah Institute, which tend to be Salafi, and radical organization such as NII, HTI, or Hizbut Tahrir Indonesia, and ISIS. Even in May 2022, we were also surprised by one of the students of the Faculty of Social and Political Science is called by Densus 2988 for allegedly being involved in the ISIS organization. According to Azumar Azra, the roots of radicalism are derived from four things. Firstly, narrow-literal and fragmentary religious facing to verses from the Al-Quran. Secondly, the wrong equation of Islamic history combined with the excessive idealization of Islam at any given time. Thirdly, argumentation of political, social, and economic deprivation that still persists in society. In sociocultural disorientation and dislocation due to globalization. Besides, Masdar Hilmi, he explained the characteristic of radicalism. There are 5 characteristics. The first, the implementation of Islamic law in all levels of life. The culmination is the establishment of an Islamic state. The second, interpret the verses of the Quran in a textualist literal manner, regardless of the historical context that occurred when the first sentence. The third, dominant use of symbols. And the fourth, looking at the everything into dimension, right and wrong, black and white, reward and punishment, halal and haram. The last, exclusively from outside influences. So, contra-radicalism education in higher education is urgent. Contra-radicalization is a process of measure to prevent a new extreme generation. It is an effort to instill nationalistic value and non-violence value. Contra-radicalization in this context is an effort to instill Indonesian national and non-violence values, which are carried out through formal education, namely universities. Religious moderation is the main key to creating a life of mutual tolerance and harmony, both at the local, global, and national level. It can reject extremism and radicalism in religion. So, in this context, Universitas Brawijaya formulate the model of contra-radicalism by the direct experience for the student, namely moral camp. Moral camp is one of the activities carried out by the Unit of Student Personality Development of Universitas Brawijaya. Moral camp has a strong foundation that focuses to students of Universitas Brawijaya on effort to care for diversity by the direct experience-based education that led to cognitive, affective, and psychomotor aspects of students. Moral camp not only provides knowledge, but also provides the real experience and examples to students to be moderate and tolerant. The student will also learn and explore the local wisdom by quarantining students to various areas so that their perspective on existing religion is not only based on religious principles, but also community tradition. After they were quarantined, they were asked to reflect on the results of these activities and how they would impact the tolerant attitude on themselves. And the last, how to insert an advocacy of religious moderation values for students. There are 4 steps. The first, students receive material on religious tolerance. And then students interacted directly with residents and religious leaders in the village. And the third, students learn about the diversity of religions, customs, and cultures in the village. And the last, students reflect the impact of moral camp for the religious moderation values. So we can conclude that moral camp is one of the model of contra-radicalism education for young generation especially in university in Indonesia. The moral camp is an alternative model where students can learn directly from the various community in the village. So they can learn directly the tolerance from the community or society, like that. I think that's all our presentation. Thank you very much for the occasion. Thank you.
Do you have the speaker on? Yeah, he's on Zoom. Yeah. Just talk to him directly. Salam alaikum. Rabiul Islam, are you with us? Rabi, are you with us? Rabiul Islam. Can you turn on your?
Sorry. Hello.
Can you hear us?
Assalamualaikum.
Can you hear us?
Rabiul Islam is speaking here.
Rabiul Islam, can you hear us?
Yes. I can hear you, but a little bit slow. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, please? Can you hear me, please? I am Rabiul Islam here.
You can hear him? We can't hear him.
Hello.
Rabiul Islam, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
We can hear him. Okay, guide me through.
This is it.
Okay. We cannot hear him. Guide me through.
Yes, I can hear you.
So, will the last speaker join us? If any of you have any questions to both the speakers, you're most welcome.
Okay.
On the Trojan Horse Affair.
Okay. Give me a moment. Open the mic.
Hello. Okay. All right. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Nija. I'm from Malaysia. I would like to ask a question to Dr. Fahid. Dr. Fahid, so you mentioned about ignorance, right? Okay, so it really reminds me of the work from Charles Taylor. He talks about the politics of recognition and identity. All right, so I just want to hear your thoughts on how would you put ignorance in this kind of picture, like, for example, perhaps, okay, this is just my 2 cents, right? Okay, like ignorance perhaps coming from the need to be recognized in a society, you know, perhaps from the government, and how would these shape the identity as oneself, and perhaps to the social hierarchies, and then towards the national movement as a whole. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
So any of you have any other questions to?
Hello. Okay, so this might be a bit of a silly question, but it is a Dr. Fahad. When you spoke about the Trojan Horse case, I wanted to ask that, yes, the Muslims in the United Kingdom were affected by it. So did they do anything to retaliate, or like how did they handle it, or did they just simply sit and take the hits that were given to them?
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, everyone. This is for Dr. Fahad as well. I listened to the Trojan Horse Affair podcast, and I found that basically their conclusion of the alleged person who allegedly wrote this letter is also Muslim. And for me, it was very interesting to see if this alleged person who wrote this letter is Muslim, how they
employed Islamophobia themselves against Muslims. And I found that to be a really interesting example of how people have internalized Islamophobia and how they've used it as a weapon against other Muslims, as Muslims themselves. So I was wondering if you could expand on that a little bit.
Okay, thank you very much for those 3 questions. As for the first question about, if I understood you correctly, about the utility of ignorance at an individual level for recognition, and I think it ties into a little bit what Mubashira is asking. Look, these sorts of practices, you can call different things, and they're connected together. So there's ignorance, there's also neutralizations and rationalizations that we make at an individual level as well, oftentimes to make sense of for ourselves conduct and behavior that we know isn't acceptable, and we tell ourselves stories to try to make sense of why we're doing what we're doing it for, and to take away the sting of that action. This is something that's, these sort of narratives have been quite widespread in the UK for the last 20 years, as Muslims, as you know, a sizable number of Muslims have engaged with the government on policies and practices that have been really harmful for Muslim communities, right? And doing it quite openly and quite outwardly and quite, quite comfortably and confidently. Whether it's the counter-extremism strategy, or whether it's other crime-related legislations and policies and practices and so on. So this is something that's been happening at a individual level, at a institutional level in the UK for quite some time. And I think that people do engage in these sort of processes of neutralization to create alternative narratives to make sense of what they're doing. Again, and I think that in terms of the question that Mubashira is asking about, it's interesting that a Muslim wrote the letter, which absolutely it is. But again, that's not something that in the history of colonialism is something which is unique. We've had what's the comprador intellectuals, we've had these people who have a history of working against the interests of their community, and this is another instance of that. In some cases, over the last 20 years, not in all cases, I'm not suggesting that's in this case, that it has happened for status and money and legitimacy and centralizing narratives and stuff like this. But it's a long practice, and it's something that has happened for quite some time. In terms of the Muslim response to the letter, yeah, of course there were campaigns, and there have been ongoing campaigns, whether that be to challenge the narrative of the letter, or whether it be to support the individuals who were caught up in this, because it had a significant impact on these people. These people lost their careers on all sorts. So the community didn't take it lying down, and it's been rejuvenated in response to the Trojan Horse letter that was the podcast that was produced.
Rabiul Islam, are you with us? Can you hear me? Yeah, but I'm not sure.
Yes, I can.
I think
Can you
your
hear me,
mic is off. Can you switch on your mic?
Mehraj, can you hear me?
Yes, my mic is on.
Mehraj, can you hear me?
No.
I think Mr. Rabiul Islam, I think
Cannot
your
hear you.
system is bilkul perfect. Mehraj, can you hear me?
Okay, should we start?
No, this the audience in the room cannot
Okay.
hear you. There is a problem.
Is it clear to you or not?
Yeah, it's clear to
We
me,
cannot
but
hear
we are
you.
waiting for
Can you hear us?
for
If you can hear us, can you raise your hand if you can hear us? Okay, yeah, so your mic is off.
My mic is also on. I don't know. Can you hear me, please?
We cannot hear you.
Is our speaker on?
Yeah.
Cannot hear you. Can you check on your computer if your volume is adjusted on your computer, on your laptop? If you're using, maybe it's on 0.
Okay, I am trying again.
We cannot hear you. If you have a headphone, please, if you can use a headphone if you have one.
Yes, I am trying.
Cannot hear you.
Mr. Islam, your system is perfect. There is something wrong in the conference room,
No,
and
we cannot hear you.
we are trying to figure it out.
Maybe conference room. Maybe there is some
Cannot hear you.
conference room. I am here.
Yeah, there is a problem. To kindly bear with us. We are trying to fix it.
Can you just log out of Zoom and maybe join again?
No, you don't have to. Your system is accurate. Okay,
We
just
can
stay
wait
with
for you
us.
for
My
2 minutes.
system
We
is
can
all
just
right,
log out
sir.
and log in again.
Okay, I am trying.
आवाज आ गई ना?
Okay. Eunice.
Wait for 2 minutes.
So we will can take some more questions.
If any of you have any questions,
Jazakallah khair. Sorry if I missed your presentation. Sister Nora, Noor, sorry. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, Noor. It's always difficult to come up here and present your work.
Excuse me.
I
Assalamu alaikum.
appreciate that.
Is it clear now?
No, sorry.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear us?
I can.
Speak. Just speak. No. No, it's fine. No, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Are you using a laptop? Rabiul Islam. Are you using a laptop? On your left corner is a mic. If you can check if it's on or off. Can you check on your left corner? There is a mic option.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, it's off now. Yeah, just yeah. Can you speak now?
Yes, please.
Something is wrong.
It's not outside.
No, it's not outside.
From my side, it's all clear.
No, we don't. We cannot hear you.
But I can.
Mehraj, can you hear me?
I'm so sorry. You can try
Mr.
again.
Islam,
We're here.
Mr.
We're
Islam,
here
please
for
stay
5-10
with
minutes.
us.
If you
We are
can try
trying to
again.
fix it.
Okay, sir.
Jazakallah khair. Sorry, yes, Sister Nora. I appreciate your presentation and sharing findings. It's always difficult as well then to critique somebody who's just presented their paper, but I just want to hope response to some ideas in relation to what you presented. It seems to me, and I'm sorry that I walked in a little bit late into your presentation, that there are some terms that you use within your presentation that are highly contested. So, for example, ideas around tolerance, ideas around radicalization, around extremism, and I would even suggest even violence.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum. Hello. Can you hear me, please?
We can hear you, Mr. Islam, but there is a problem in the room, as I said before, and they are trying to fix it. But I think you cannot hear any sound from the room right now.
Okay, it's all clear to me. Is it
Can you
clear
hear
to-
the sound from the room?
Right now. And in other way,
Can you hear me, please? Hello. Can you hear me, please?
our faith is at stake, our identity is at stake of alternate paradigms, and to create what Wang Aranjun Few, even heard of him.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you please make me host, co-host? Hello.
Very much.
mobile expert.
In educational structures where they are actually creating a moderate Muslim. So I just want to get your thoughts on that, because I think that I just think there's some things that sorry, I'm not trying to put any pressure on you, but it's just that I, for example, was really shocked when I moved to Malaysia and saw some things at my university that was 105% state funded. Like the things I was learning had no basis in Quran, Sunnah, or in any of like Islamic theology, but it was being pushed in a way that this is Islam, and if you're not this, then you're not a moderate. So, you know, then in Malaysia, I would be considered a radical. You know what I mean? So like, what does it mean then to be radical? Like if Allah is the one I submit to, am I a radical? You know what I mean? Like, sorry, I'm not trying to put any pressure on you, but I just think I think it's a very important discussion, especially in that region.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it is necessary absolutely, because this is our interested discussion like that, and in Indonesian context, there are many various idea, and we can combine the groups. So we must we must give the we must give our student the moderate idea, and moderate idea and tolerance, so we can promote more easy like that.
I guess what they're asking you is, what do you mean by tolerance and moderate?
Tolerance and moderation.
What does it mean?
Moderation is the wasatiyah in Arabic, wasatiyah, like that. Not right and left, not extremely. Like that.
Yeah, it's a question.
There's a liberal Wasati and there's a Kardawi Muslim.
Yes.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. Okay, my name is Diki Rasha Asari. You can call me Rasha. I'm a student of Political Science and International Relations of Istanbul Sabahattin Zain. And this is my third year here. And I'm from Jakarta, Indonesia. And I would like to ask a question to Ms. Nur Chanifah that I already make notes on my phones that, as we know, that Indonesia is one of the largest countries with the largest Muslim majority. And also in Indonesia, we live together with the several other religions, like as we, or maybe some of you already know that in Indonesia, we have more than 5 religions. I mean, like Christianity and Catholic, Hindus, Buddhists, and etc. And Confucius is from the Chinese. And also, because of these matters, is there any many young generation who easily follow foreign cultures? Because as we know now, we got some foreign culture, for example, like Korean, and in the past we also have Indian cultures, etc. And this matter is many young generation fed away from the Islamic culture itself. So is this the factor also one of the causes of the fading of Islamic culture in Indonesia, or is there any other factors? And how do we solve this problem? And who plays an important role in this solving this problem? I mean, from the parents or from the government? Because we know, like in Indonesia as well, we have so many Islamic, many kind of Islamic school, but you know, after they graduate, after they studied 3 years, 4 years, after they graduate from the school, many of students, especially me, I was graduate from Al-Azhar school in Jakarta, and also with my friends. But after we graduate, we don't get any Islamic study, because in high school I studied in government school, and I was so far away from Islamic world. So do you have any suggestion, or do you know how to solve this problem about the radical Islamic or etc.? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Actually, the case of the promote to Islamic moderate is in the family, because family is the first education for the children. Maybe the student have education for 8 hours in every day, and then the others in families. So the parents have urgent urgent. Yes, the real rule to promote moderate Islam, like that. Families is the key, like that. So if you get problems in the school, and the parents not don't know, it is dangerous, like that. So the school must cooperate with families, make cooperate. And in the school in Indonesian context, there are committee sekolah, like that, to discuss about the problem in the school, like the radicalism and the lecture, or must give knowledge that the matter of the moderate Islam is urgent, like that. So because the most of the problems, the lecture give radical or extreme idea. So the first, we must give knowledge to the lecture that moderate Islam is urgent, like that.
So basically, it's from the parents, or the parent thinks they can teach the children, right? About the
Yes, families and lecture, they have urgent role. Okay.
Some loaded statements. Right.
Yes.
Pretty. What is moderate? What is moderate Islam?
That's the kind where I'm finding the crux of it, like if it's the lecturer's issue. Saying, what is then moderate Islam? Is it something that the state gets to define, or is it something that is theologically informed? You know what I mean? Yes. The moderation is not in this context is the wasatiyah, not the right or left or but not extremes like that, not extreme, because the radical is so extremes like that.
Like it's Quranic wasatiyah.
Wasatiyah.
Quranic.
Yes.
Not the state defined wasatiyah.
Yes, wasatiyah.
Right.
Quranic wasatiyah.
Thank you so much. Jazakumullah khair for participating in this session. Dr. Fahad, Dr. Nur, for your presence, inshallah. We'll hope to see you soon again in Istanbul for another conference. And thank you all for participating in this discussion and in this session. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah help us to grow closer to Him and closer to faith, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much to the moderator. Now, because Dr. Asim Qurashi is here, we will take full advantage of his presence. Dr. Asim, please, we invite you to present souvenirs to our presenters. Mr. Fahid. So, Dr. Asim will present souvenir to Dr. Fahid Qurashi. Please, a round of applause for the presenter. Ms. Nur Chanifah. Ladies and gentlemen, we need some appreciation for our presenters. Ms. Nur Chanifah. Thank you so much, sir. So we will proceed with our session 8 at 4 o'clock in Isafam Auditorium, the main auditorium from where we started our conference, and it will be an open discussion with the scholars on how to control Islamophobia